according to the official lore, Thomas the Tank Engine was active and working since 1915, which means he and his friends were around during World War II. So, what exactly was Thomas doing back then? Was he used as a war locomotive? Well, my friends, even if it sounds like a weird idea for a kids show, the truth is, if you dig deep enough, you'll find a bunch of disturbing facts tied to the main topic of this video. So, if you want to know what happened to Thomas and his friends during World War II, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, or else Thomas the Tank Engine is gonna crash straight into your house and make you homeless. The Adventures of Thomas and Friends is one of those franchises with really solid lore, development, and backstory. It goes way back, like way before the dinosaurs and all the way up to 2019. And in case you didn't know, Thomas has had multiple series and adaptations over the years. Anyway, the first books were published in the 1940s, and the earliest stories are set around 1945. So, does that mean World War II didn't happen in the Thomas universe? Well, we actually have a few clues that can lead us to a real answer. First, we need to know that Thomas and Friends was created by Wilbert Awdry, who started writing these stories for his son Christopher during World War II while they were taking shelter from the bombings. He actually never said it outright, but many believe that what he was living through at the time influenced the lore behind Thomas. Then we've got the earliest date mentioned in the Thomas series, 1922, in the episode The Sad Story of Henry. Oh yeah, some of you probably remember how infamous this episode is. Henry refuses to come out of the tunnel because he doesn't want his fresh green paint to get ruined. So they just break him up inside a tunnel. And we know it's 1922 because Gordon hadn't arrived to the island of Sodor yet. He shows up until 1923 to pull Henry out of the tunnel. So the dates are there. But what about Thomas? If we go outside of the show, the official lore says he's been operational since 1915, right in the middle of World War I. So that would mean he lived through both wars. But is there really any proof of that? Honestly, it's most likely that the creators of Thomas just decided to skip over these horrible events to avoid upsetting the young audience. The dates are there, but maybe the events are not. Well, nope. You're wrong, my friends. There actually is proof that this war happened in the Thomas and Friends universe. The most solid piece of evidence comes from a 1972 lecture by the creator of Thomas himself. It's called Narrow Gauge Rails in Sodor. And in this lecture, it's mentioned that in 1939, the year World War II started, Skarloey Railways borrowed 2 diesel engines from the British War Department. Their main job? Transporting timber and explosives, because Skarloey and Rainias, the 2 oldest engines, were just too old to handle it anymore. And in case you didn't know, those 2, Skarloey and Rainias, are one of the most important engines in the Thomas history. They're the oldest engines in Sodor. Later in the same lecture, it stated that when the war ended in 1945, those 2 diesel engines left the island of Sodor. So yeah, World War II did happen in Thomas' world. And that's not the only proof we've got, friends. In the 1987 book, The Island of Sodor, Its People, History and Railways, there's another detail added. The Skarloey Quarry was used by the British Department of Defense to store ammo and explosives. This links directly to the story of those 2 diesel engines sent by the War Department we mentioned earlier. And let's not forget, this book is considered the official atlas of the island of Sodor. It includes detailed maps, historical dates, town names, and even how the railway infrastructure was used during wartime. In other words, for fans, this isn't just a kid's story. Sodor has real military history. And here's another fun fact. During this time, the island of Sodor is a British island, which means they were on the Allied side during the war. So it'll make sense for the Department of Defense to have multiple sentient vehicles working for them. Which also means, yeah, the other side probably had talking machines too. It's weird to think that German trains in this universe knew exactly what they were doing and the consequences of their actions. But wait, we still haven't answered the main question of this video. What exactly was Thomas the Tank Engine doing during all this? Well, to be honest, there's no solid answer out there. You won't find any official source explaining what Thomas was up to during this entire global conflict. Unless you've heard about the cancelled Thomas the Tank Engine movie. Yep, in 2010 there were plans to make a live-action Thomas movie directed by Shane Acker, the same guy behind the movie 9. And guess what? This movie was gonna be set during the years of World War II. It was gonna feature the same characters we've always seen in Thomas and Friends, the island of Sodor, and of course, references directly tied to World War II. Now, here's something important to note. This movie never got released because when Mattel bought Heat Entertainment, the company that owned the rights to Thomas and Friends, they found out about the plot of the movie and decided to cancel it. Of course they didn't want to damage Thomas's reputation with their young audience. But this tells us that maybe it was gonna be part of Thomas's official lore. Although some people also believe it would have been a total reboot of the franchise, this time with a much more serious tone, even made for adults. They believe this reboot would launch a live-action series with these characters, but aimed at a more mature audience. Anyway, why don't we take a look at the plot to get an idea of what Thomas was doing during those dark times. The movie begins with a boy named Johnny and his father, who are fleeing London during the Blitz in World War II. They are evacuated to the father's childhood home, which is located near a train station. There, Johnny finds drawings his father made of trains with faces. One night, Johnny can't sleep and heads to the station. That's when he meets Edward, who needs help removing a stuck signal from his wheels. As a thank you, Edward takes Johnny on a ride through otherworldly caves and waterfalls, and eventually they arrive to the island of Sodor. It's a magical kingdom ruled entirely by trains, no humans at all. Throughout the movie, Johnny travels back and forth between Sodor and his new home. He tells his dad about his adventures, but his father doesn't believe him, having forgotten about Sodor himself, until he reunites with Thomas at the end of the movie. Thomas and Johnny travel different parts of the island and meet new characters, including Bertha, 4 military ships, 2 of which are husband and wife, and 3 French mining carts, who lead a resistance against the diesel engines using underground tunnels. At the climax of the film, there's a relay race across Sodor between the steam engines and the diesels. Gordon, who had been missing during the diesel takeover, shows up and saves the day. And the movie ends with the image of Thomas, Johnny, and his father riding off into the sunset. So there you have it, friends. World Wars did happen in the Thomas and Friends universe. Sodor was likely used as a secret base by the British government. It's most likely that Thomas and his friends knew about the war, but thankfully they didn't have to get directly involved in any fighting. Maybe that's when Thomas met Johnny and the events of the cancelled movie happened. Or maybe that never made it into the official lore, and Thomas just kept working like we've always seen him do in the show. And to wrap things up, here's one last fact that might get you thinking the next time you rewatch the classic Thomas and Friends episodes. Based on the timeline, the first episodes of Thomas and Friends take place while Sodor is just starting to recover from World War II. So, while Thomas was learning about friendship, honesty, and bravery, other parts of the world were still completely destroyed. Anyway, what do you think about this dark side of Thomas and Friends? Have you ever thought about something like this before? We'll be reading your thoughts in the comments.